All right. It says we're live.
Cool. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. So thankful to be here, and I think this is really cool. You guys, we're going live right now on both of our Facebook pages, and the way we met is like quite serendipitous. It's such a cool story. It's been over a year since we've known each other. Olivia Dane, who is a mentor and a client. Like, I mean, I know her on so many different levels. She's a phenomenal artist and just human on this planet. And somehow she knew about Stefan, or Stefan knew about her, and Stefan is writing a book right now. And Olivia recommended that he interview me for his book, and that was a year ago. And now I have done 3 different coaching sessions with Stefan, and his process is something that one, I can relate to and have learned a lot from and has benefited me, and two, I know that it can benefit so many other people, and so that is why we're on this live right now. So Stefan, if you can please start by introducing the book, because I kind of prefaced
Yeah.
that, and then also a little bit about you and your practice and what we're going to do today.
Okay, cool. And I also want to introduce you for my audience. Maybe you can say
Cool.
who you are.
Yeah.
My name is Stefan Grafstein. I'm a transformational coach. I've been coaching about 10 years. And my book is called The Power of Risk. And it's really, my learnings in my life around how to be better, how to transform oneself through my journey, which has been impacted by a lot of different things, but a lot by adventure sports. I was in college and I was acting out in some really dangerous and taking unhealthy risks. And I went to a psychologist and I'm like, I think I need some help. And she said, you need to find healthy risks. So I started to surf big waves, and I was a class 5 whitewater river guide and started to do backcountry snowboarding. And so Madeline is also a big backcountry enthusiast. And
Yeah.
one of the stories that you told about ice climbing with your skis, this band of ice across this crazy death defying route, is going to be in the book.
Yeah, the ribbon at Alta. So if you look up at the Run Castle, it's skis underneath this 600-foot cliff, and I free soloed part of that route, and that was one of the risky things I've done, not even the riskiest, and so it was really cool to be able to decompress that experience with you. Yeah, so I'm a professional. I feel like I'm a recovering professional free solo ice climber and skier. The last big risk I took was about almost 2 years ago. I actually fell free solo ice climbing with the skis on my back nearly 2 years ago to this day. And so still being able to talk about this and being alive, and now finding for me healthier risks are going to be in business, because I can't die, right? And you need to be risky if you want to be successful in business. And so that is really working for me right now, and I'm having a really good time still learning from those experiences in the mountains, and still having experiences in the mountains, just not necessarily pushing myself to the limit that I did for the last 5 years.
So I don't know if I told you, but about 5 years ago, I fractured a vertebrae, C2, snowboarding. I don't know how bad your fall was, but maybe at some point we could share stories of recovery.
Yeah, I ended up being fine. My hand was bloody. My brain is what my mental space
Yeah,
got shooken up for sure. My
yeah.
body's fine. Yeah.
Well, so just a little bit more about the power of risk. You know, I'm right now learning to do something called wing foiling, which is
Mm.
riding a foil surfboard
Oh
with
yeah.
using a wing that you hold in your hands instead of a kite, which is attached to lines on your harness. And a few years ago, I learned how to snow kite, and before that, kite surf. And so I was thinking today as I went out, I was stand up paddling with the foil board today, which is, if you don't know, it's riding above the water on a airplane wing like thing that rises the board up. And I thought, this is so hard. And one of the ideas in the Power of Risk book is that doing anything that challenges you, that has a risk component to it, whether big or small, can have a transformational experience on your state in the moment. You can get out of the mind and out of your emotional limitations and into the present. And that's where we find what we'll talk about later, the inner knowing voice. And so it's necessary for most people who do adventure sports or anything that's risky to start new practices frequently, because we get good at something like ice climbing, right? The limits that you have to get to in order to have that flow, the risk becomes too great. So I encourage people to take something up that's new. Like right now, Friday, I'm going to start singing lessons. So
Oh, cool.
that might become my next risk.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's like so true in the industry because when people start, so now I'm like a ski model. And when people start getting like too good and taking too big of risks, like for me, I went to business, but for some people, like skiers will switch to snowboarding or the opposite, like snowboarders will switch to skiing or snowboarders will switch to is it snow surfing, snow skating? It's when you don't have bindings and so you can't like it's new
Snurfing.
again. It's exciting.
It's called
Yeah, it's like
snurfing
snurfing.
with an
Snurfing?
N. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, snurfing. I got some friends snurfing out there right now because the cliffs, like if they were to take another level to their sport that they've been doing since they were a small child, like it'd be like 100-foot cliffs. So now they're not hitting cliffs, they're just on like low angle POW, but it's still difficult. They're falling and it's good because that's filling the void that needed to be filled that the 100-foot cliff would have filled at their other sport.
Yeah. Yeah. So whether it's business, singing or snurfing, just finding that what's the next challenge that is a risk physically or emotionally, and just enough risk. If it's too much risk, you might collapse and have trauma, like quote unquote trauma, meaning like it was overwhelmingly difficult and needing time to integrate where you retreat away from the activity, are not ideal. We want to just take a little bit of risk so we can develop proficiency and find that moment of freedom from the mind and from the whatever the weight of life is.
Yeah. Well, what a great intro to our topics of the day. Topic of the day. How do you, so you have, the way Stefan introduced it to me are that there are three voices inside of you coming from different places. So we basically have these different bodies and beings within this container that is ourselves. And by understanding the different voices that are coming through you, you can help to process your emotions more effectively. You can also help to understand because sometimes, being in something, you have this clouded perception because you're in it and you're not the observer of it. And so if you're in it, it's hard to figure out what the next step is. So Stefan's process helps you figure out how to like congruently and efficiently like navigate your life and the emotions and everything that comes to you.
Yes, it's been a developing framework that is kind of based on other teachings that I've learned and been trained in over the years. And I like to call it the three voices, though there's actually more than three points of consciousness or perspective that it has. You mentioned the observer. So like when we meditate and we observe our thoughts, like there's a difference between having thoughts and then noticing that you're thinking about something and being able to take your attention away from your thoughts, which is what we do often in meditation, in certain types of meditation. So besides the three voices, there's also the fourth point of the observer. And the three voices are categories of different voices or thoughts or feelings or experiences that arise within us. We won't dive into instinct, but instinct is another point of origin of experiences, like the wanting to eat or the wanting to have sex or the wanting to play could be considered like instinct. I just added in play there for the first time. I don't know if play is an instinct or not, but those are,
Totally.
yeah, those are
Yeah.
more of our animal urges, right?
Yeah, anything my dog does, he plays.
Right, right,
I feel like
right.
it'd be instinct. Yeah.
Right, totally. So the other three might be non-animal states of consciousness, right? But they might be emotional category of voices, the analytical category of voices, and then the inner knowing category of voices. And they're each distinctly different and can be identified by different marker points. And within each one, there's different sub voices that could be in there. Like in the analytical, you might have a perfectionist inside of you that's always analyzing everything so acutely. And you could name, oh, my perfectionist right now is wanting to tell me to do, better job. You could have a judge inside of you that's always passing judgment on what's right and wrong. And so those are examples of the sub parts that are within the three different categories. Should I keep going, or do you have a question, or how are we doing?
Oh, well, I'm just noticing those inside of me. Like the judgment for me speaks up often.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
keep going. Keep
Yeah.
going.
So these are culturally like based. Typically, these are learned groups of patterning. Our culture in the West does not teach a lot of inner knowing. We're taught our mind is our most powerful tool, and other cultures who might believe in magic or might believe in compassion, like maybe in Buddhist cultures, if compassion is a much stronger value, the inner knowing might be a much louder, prominent voice. But in the West, the emotional and analytical are our dominant voices. And so we're taught that there is a right and wrong way to do things. So we develop a judge that is judging the right and wrong, because that's what we have modeled. Our consciousness has been modeled after our family, our society, our culture, the people around us that imprinted on us how we should be. Now, another framework here is that we are a sponge as a young person. We are a computer that has a program, and the programs we run are the ones that were loaded on us by those influences growing up. And they're changeable if you can see them from the observer. Until we can see them, they're just running, and things just come out of our mouth when they say, well, I unconsciously did that. That's the program running. Mm-hmm. And even our personality, even our mature self is a program running. I really love, I've been sharing with my clients lately to watch the documentary Andy and Me with Jim Carrey about the making of the movie The Man on the Moon. Oh. Where he becomes Andy Kaufman for like months or weeks, and he's just in that character. And in the end, he says the character Jim Carrey was no longer him. He had to act to be Jim Carrey. Like the program of Jim Carrey after months of being Andy Kaufman was hard to find again, and it wasn't no longer a natural program. It's a program he could choose to run, but it was no longer like just his default persona.
That's really cool. That should be inspiring to anyone watching this, that everyone is wanting to change little things about themselves. And if it's in alignment to shift for the betterment of you, it's possible. And so, Stefan, how do you notice, first off, what program you have running? Because you need to notice, as you said before, you can change it. So how do you notice?
So the first thing is I'll start with is to start with the idea that we are not our thoughts. We are not our feelings. Have you heard this before? We are the observer of our thoughts and feelings. The I that is Stefan and the I that is Madeline is not the one who's getting upset or the one who's judging. The actual I of who you are on a level of altitude above the fluctuations of emotion and thinking and judgment is a consciousness that observes your life and your own inner workings. So you can disidentify as the one who is angry to become the one who's observing the anger within oneself. So the first step is you need to learn to become the observer and identify as a consciousness that can witness the goings on. Viktor Frankl, in his book, The Man's Search for Meaning, about being in a concentration camp, talked a lot about the gap between stimulus and response. Mm-hmm. Or a man's ability to choose his attitude is his most powerful, freedom, or something like that. And that's this concept that things happen, emotions happen, and we can take a breath and go, oh my gosh, I'm about to go off on this person, is the beginning of the development of that skill of observation. So if I used to have rage up until 28, I would throw things and furniture and all kinds of, wild stuff. And learning to notice, oh my gosh, I'm about to lose it, and choosing to de-escalate, remove myself from the situation, was the kind of things that I did to begin to choose other than just letting the emotion run me.
So noticing, I think that right there could be a whole 8-week course. And so
Totally.
for people so we start with the premise of you need to you need to at least be on board with the I am not my thoughts and feelings. I can be the observer. That needs to be a premise that people start with. And then I'm sure we've all noticed oh, I'm about to do this thing. I'm about to go off on someone. We've noticed that. I think everyone's kind of been in that situation, and usually we go off on the person, but we notice before that we're about to do it. And so that, I think, is a small half step maybe in the direction of starting to become the observer. You keep mentioning marker points. So I'm wondering what these are. There concrete marker points that people can use?
Well, so the marker points for I'll name the marker points for the 3 different groups of voices. Okay. And, so first I'll say this: in my framework, I am biased towards inner knowing being better. My judge says inner knowing is better because my life was a lot of emotion and a lot of analytical. I'm naturally super analytical. So the inner knowing is more like intuition, or, the book Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. That's kind of inner knowing space, or your higher self, or your true self. Any kind of consciousness that resides on a more compassionate, loving type of energy would be inner knowing. So the inner child I often call the emotional, and the inner critic I often use as a term for the analytical. It's not just critical, it's just the critical mind. These ones we can't avoid. It's a part of being a human. So it's not about making them wrong or trying to avoid them. It's trying to, what I call, make friends with them so that they are less of an enemy and less combative and less controlling of us, right? It's they say you want to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Well, I'd say the same thing with these parts. And so the emotional voices are, the marker point is when you have an emotional voice, there's a physical contraction of a muscle or more muscles than one in the body. So if you're happy, you might throw your hands up in the air and yell, I won the race, something like that. Angry, could be fists, fear. I put fear in emotional because there's a, tightening. And though it's a contraction, the emotional voices have a contraction. Mm-hmm. And the contraction, for a well-functioning, healthy, integrated being, the contraction needs to be released rather than repressed and held. So everyone is repressing and holding things. None of us are completely, free of that.
Yeah. You've mentioned the drum too, which I think is a really good analogy if you want to bring that up with just compressing our emotions until you get to a point where there's no room left in the drum.
Yeah. So to dive deeper into the emotional voices, what I'll say is that the infant human is the perfect emotional processing machine. When they get upset, they wave their arms and legs, and their full body is expressing their feelings. And then all of the energy leaves the body. And then 1 second later, they're smiling. As soon as they get the bottle or the blanket or whatever it is, they don't hold on to anything. But as soon as we're old enough to be told, okay, time to use your words, hold it in, we're at a store, you can't have a tantrum here, we begin to hold the energetic contraction. And I like to describe that as putting a drop in the bucket of the emotional body that I imagine is like a 55-gallon drum surrounding your whole body, as tall as you are. And every time there's an emotional experience, which happens every day for every person, there's disappointment, frustration, neglect, whatever it is, or bigger experiences, traumas or micro traumas, that fills up this bucket or this 55-gallon drum. And over time, the drum fills up, and one day you've heard someone say it, I've had it up to here. And that literally, in my framework, their bucket, their 55-gallon drum is full to this point where they have inability to have the observation or the witness or that space between stimulus and response that Viktor Frankl speaks of. Because there's no space for them. If you can, doing emotional process work or coaching or therapy or skiing maybe, we release this energy, and we get a freedom. And the lower we can keep that level of all of the past contractions that we're holding, the more space we have between stimulus and response.
That's awesome. Thank you for diving deep into that, because I think, inner knowing might be new for some people or not, but we can all relate to our emotions working through us, controlling us, talking to us, telling us what to do, and being suppressed. Everyone's been told, keep it down. This isn't the space to have the tantrum, but you know what? You're also not allowed to have the tantrum at home. So,
and do you teach something like freedom of expression and stuff in your work? Am I recalling that correctly? Like being more wild, like being more wild. Do you have a word? Do you use the word wild in your work, in your marketing?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't use the word wild. I try to use the words that my clients use so that I make sure to attract the right person that my work will benefit. I don't do emotional release work with my clients. It's something that I'm not trained in holding at a virtual distance, right? Like doing it in person is very different than doing that virtually. And so that is something that I get coached on, but I don't actually coach others on.
Yeah, well, I'm just asking because I know that it's very popular in women's coaching to coach around becoming more expressed and wild. And that is essentially what I'm encouraging people, but just do it responsibly.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Express responsibly.
Yeah. So what I like to say is elegant living or elegant relating in a healthy, integrated way is being as fully expressed in all of our feelings and all of our contractions as possible, while creating the least number of contractions in others around us.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to frame it. I like that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the analytical.
Yeah.
We talked about the knowing, the emotional, and now the analytical.
Yeah. So the analytical is where our beliefs reside. And there's an interplay between the analytical and the emotional. So you might have an emotion because you have a belief or a value. Like you might value politeness and someone's being rude and you get angry at them. Like, why are you being rude?
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a value or belief that polite is better than rude. The analytical, I think, is great for the scientific method, for hypothesis and research. I used to work in research, so I'm familiar with that world and doing spreadsheets. But it's not as typically as useful and good and elegant in relational dynamics. The analytical takes up a lot of energy. It's uncertain. When you say, well, I think that, or let me consider that, or well, maybe these are all the phrases that the analytical part of us uses because it needs proof to believe something. It's inherently suspicious. There's a twist of skepticism that is within all of the analytical voices parts, and this is difficult for many people to consider because in the West, the analytical is the part that's been valued for centuries, since the Greek, philosophers teaching us that I think, therefore I am, and, scientific method. So my perspective now for myself is I'm just trying to think as little as possible every day, because that creates more space for insights to come in through the inner knowing, which is more of a clear knowing that's powerful and grounded and doesn't have the I'm not certain, maybe, let me think about it, feel.
Cool. I think you just said something really, really important since we have so many different people listening to this. You mentioned that the inner knowing is a voice that you want to listen to more often than the others. Could there be a scenario where someone wants to listen to their emotional or analytical voice more often, or are you pretty certain that the inner, like if you were to make space for the divine to come through, for that inner knowing to give you insight, that would actually be the best way to live and process life?
Well, it's a personal choice. I have to say that I was raised in a family that is involved in a spiritual movement, and with the idea that there's something beyond us that's unexplainable that we can tap into and have guidance in finding our right work in life. And there's been times in my life where I really tried to reject those beliefs because it seemed like life would be much easier if everything was just very explainable and very clear and very provable, because the unknown is very hard at times to be okay with. And so what I'll say is I find with all my clients that the inner knowing will communicate what is for you in this life. It might not be fame. It might not be riches. It might not be happiness, but it will be something that is really valuable to you. And that can be interpreted in a lot of ways. It might guide you to leave your marriage. It might guide you to move to a new place. It might guide you to start or end a business where your analytical, emotional voices are like, no way. That's, I don't want to do that. So I personally do my best to have more inner knowing guidance and work to reduce the limitations to follow that, which is the doubt of the analytical and the fear or frustration or sadness of the emotional. Now, those are really loud voices. And there's also people saying, follow your heart. And when you hear that, what does that mean? Does it mean follow my emotional heart, or does it follow my inner knowing, spiritual heart, you might call it? So I also look at the emotional voices as the younger self. If you listen to one of the voices speaking and from the emotional place, you can probably hear that it sounds younger than your current age, anywhere from 3 to 33 or 55. If you're 60, you could hear, oh, that was me regressing to a less mature perspective. And bringing it back to like spiritual, paths, they speak about acceptance and equanimity as more evolved states of being, where we can learn to not be emotional when things don't go the way that we want, and have acceptance of all that happens. So how's that for an answer on if we should listen to the other voices?
I think that's great. I think that's great. And you just like wrapped that up with how do we react when things don't go our way. that is right now the base, like that is the basis of my personal development work, is like, how do I react when things don't go my way? And the first time I was asked that question, I was kind of like, oh, well, things like typically go my way. I'm like, I'm okay, I'm chill with it. And then like you really start to notice, because there's multiple times a day that things don't go your way. It's like, wow, like, but at first it was anger, and now I've like worked through that anger, and now it's sadness. It's like you'll see as you start to like peel away the layers, or like work through your drum. Like I've had it up to here drum. It's like, well, here to here was anger, but now here to here is sadness. Like, oh, what's underneath that? Yeah, lots of work. And so how do we do this work, Stefan? Do you have any sort of exercises that you can give our amazing viewers to start to tap into this work of yours, maybe before they can start working with you personally?
Yeah, so definitely working with a professional is highly recommended. You know, it can be done on your own, and it just takes a commitment to doing it, because what we're talking about is repatterning your habits and your subconscious programming. And those are hard coded, or, at this point, because they've been running our whole lives. So, we can just start with meditation, meditation or sitting. I actually like to call it sitting rather than meditation, because meditation sounds like you have to be doing something, when really, for me, it's just finding more space between our thoughts so that we can have a quieter state of being, and becoming the observer of the thoughts. Yoga. I love yoga. It's breath and movement together really quiets my thoughts and allows me to be more here. And when I'm more here, I'm less in the emotional and the analytical. And essentially, for me, what I'm wanting to achieve is clearing out all the noise of the analytical and the emotional, so that the inner knowing can be heard. Additional exercises could be journaling about what you observed. Did you observe your emotions? How many times did you observe them before responding with them? How long after they started did it take you to realize you were in an emotional experience? Did it overtake you immediately and take you an hour before you were like, wait a minute, what's happening? Or did you catch it? Maybe over a week or two or a month or two, you can start to notice, oh my gosh, I'm catching it even quicker. I'm catching it, 3 seconds or 1 second, after it begins. So it's just a process of helping your observer or your witness part become more dominant and more a part of your natural states. And so that's the first step, learning to observe, really to see. And the second part, maybe we don't get into today, but I can just say what it is making friends with the parts. We can't really make friends with them and spend time with them if we are identifying as them, if we're expressing emotionally to people without realizing what we're doing, which isn't to mean we should never yell at someone. Like, I will raise my voice if I need someone to get like, hey, you're crossing a boundary and that is no longer acceptable and I'm leaving, or whatever, I raise my voice if I need to, but I don't ever want to lash out and have my anger be spoken unconsciously.
Mm-hmm. That feels like it was word for word from the Thich Nhat Hanh book I was reading. I have been reading every night, How to Fight.
What does he say?
Have you heard of that?
I know Thich Nhat Hanh, but I haven't read his work.
Oh my gosh, you should get the book How to Fight. It's like you just basically summarize the whole book. It's like don't let your anger, right, that lashing out, be your voice. Like what you first do when you like, don't let anger speak for you. Basically, like in his Thich Nhat Hanh's practice is all about like compassion. So finding compassion, like the person you're the most mad at, literally like give them a gift instead of lashing out in anger. That's like the basis of his message in his life. But yeah, that book, it's like this big, and it's been really great. It's really like how not to fight, but the book is called How to Fight. Yeah, so don't let your anger speak for you.
Yeah, great. So if you can notice it arising, then you can choose otherwise.
Hmm.
If you can forgive the thing that your analytical and emotional parts are making wrong, because emotions happen when we are in resistance to whatever's happening.
Hmm.
So we're
Hmm.
making it wrong. Like, this is not okay. I don't want this. I'm not in acceptance of this.
Right.
So if we can notice it and then somehow let go of it, we can then offer a gift. I mean, we could offer a gift in like, we could, by the way, do you know what this is? Domio?
No.
Oh my gosh. This is, goes on your helmet and it makes your helmet into a speaker. So you don't have to wear headphones.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I was just picking it off my desk as like a gift. Like, we can talk about it more later, but I could give you this gift and say, well, I'm mad at you, but I'm going to give you this gift, which might be technically what he's saying, but in spirit, not quite embodying that. But how do
Right.
we shift from the anger into the real compassionate generosity? That's a whole other process.
Like years. Or not. Or the snap of the finger.
Well, what I'll say is this: when the 55-gallon drum of your emotional body is full to the top and we get triggered emotionally, we can hold that grudge for days, weeks, or lifetime. Like, if somebody who never forgives, like maybe a betrayal in marriage or something like that, and they're always their whole life, angry at that person, it's because their emotional body drum is full. And the work to clear it out by doing coaching or healing work of whatever kind, plant medicine or therapy or skiing or whatever, is the thing that allows you to tap into and feel the contractions, and you can reduce it down to the bottom or close to the bottom. That's where we have more ability to quickly switch from the emotional reaction to a more chosen state.
Hmm. Yes. Oh, I think this is like a really good place to pause
Okay.
and, yeah, wrap up this conversation because we just gave so, we just gave a lot. And so now everyone watching this needs to be able to integrate. And so how do you integrate? Well, Stefan just gave you three ways to do that. And they're kind of in this like sequential order, starting with sitting and noticing the space between. You don't have to use the word meditation, but meditation really just is noticing the space between your thoughts. It's not that those thoughts aren't going to stop coming through. It's that we sit and we watch them come and go. And that like also logically helps us Westerners realize that we are not our thoughts because we're still here, but the thoughts come and they go. And so that's step one. Step two is journaling. And I can't actually, did you give a specific prompt or did you say to just like journal about the experience?
Yeah, track what you're noticing during the day. So you would sit down, look back, and say, how many times today or what moments today did I observe my thoughts the same way I do when I'm sitting, but while I
Mm-hmm.
was waking? How many
Mm,
times did I notice I was about to pass a judgment or about to express emotionally and I caught myself? Even if I still said the thing, I noticed it before saying it, and begin to track how many times a day or how frequently or what's the gaps you're finding that are lengthening, in your capacity to observe.
I love that. And that can be as simple as carrying a notebook in your pocket. We all have cell phones that are basically glued to our bodies. So you can have like a note tracker on that. You can take a pen and do like ticks on your hand, whatever works for you. Like make it your own. Use the tools that you have, whether it's a notebook, a pen, or your iPhone. Like start to track. Some people do journaling at the end of the day. So maybe it's like an end of the day thing for you or a beginning of the day thing for you whenever you have that time. And if you don't already have that time to just like decompress life, I recommend giving yourself 5 minutes a day minimum to do that. And then the third was getting to know your emotions. for me, and working with you, it was dancing with fear. So I'm like dancing with my emotions. What I tell my clients is to, when they're having like money issues, like they're living in scarcity. Okay, well, that scarcity is not you. It's coming from somewhere else. So let's learn more about it. It's here to give you a message. It's here to protect you. Pour yourself a glass of wine, pour your emotion a glass of wine or whatever. I don't drink water, whatever. Sit at the table and like have space for your emotion and get to know it. Like go on a date with it. Make it fun. And so that's kind of like step 3 here. And if you're already like familiar with these processes of noticing, maybe like you can just start with step 3, or maybe you're ready to hire a coach to help you walk through that program. I know Stefan is currently accepting clients, and I can be a testament to his work. It's phenomenal. That's why I wanted to have this conversation with him. I'm still like, I've heard all of this from you many times, and I'm still like gaining information from this call, new information. So I want to thank you for that, for just being on here with me today and doing this cool, like, it's, if you guys are watching this right now live on Facebook, it's super sweet because we're like cross-posting on each other's business pages, and I'm learning a lot about like business and emotional life and just like decompressing my athletic career with Stefan. So thank you. And if you have anything else that you want to say to our audience live here now and in the future as people watch the replay, this is your chance.
Well, it's been super fun being here. I'd love to ski together sometime soon, and I really enjoy the kind of the ease and flow that we have. It feels like we have similar perspectives, and I love that you value what I've brought, and I'm happy to engage with anyone that has questions about what I've shared or have judgments and they don't believe me or have other viewpoints. Like, bring it. I love chatting about this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Oh gosh, you just said the word judgment, but for me, like, so my homework from this is going to be to stop categorizing judgment as me. I always say I judge myself, but then I notice after I say it, like, wait, I'm actually like, I'm not the judger, the judger's inside of me. So getting to know that, it's something that I want to change. And so what do I have to do? I have to get to know it. So that's what I'm going to be doing after this call. That's what I'm going to be tracking. And so I'd like for you guys to take a second and get out a piece of paper and just write down what commitment you're making to yourself. What step that we talked about are you going to incorporate into your day? And if you want to just take 30 seconds to write that down, what you're going to do, I just shared it with you. I'm going to get to know the judger inside of me and see what sort of lessons it's bringing me, why it's keeping me safe, and potentially release it if it's time for it to go, which I sure as heck think it is.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. What are you going to do, Stefan? What are you working on?
What am I working on? I'm working right now on getting to bed earlier so that I can go surf at 6 a.m. Because
Where are you?
I'm in Puerto Rico, and I just, I've been working so much on my book, and my website, stefangrafstein.com, just went live. It's still not done. So I'm just, working with clients, and I'm just love what I do. And I'm just so in that I sometimes won't even break to go surfing. And I live 2 blocks from the beach. So my practice right now is get in the water, no matter, like today, the waves were like 2 foot, and I just got out there and, doing yoga. I didn't do yoga yet today, but I hope to do it a little bit later. And I am working on patience. So the part of me that's very driven, it's kind of a scarcity thing. It's like time scarcity, like things have to happen right away. And, I want everybody, like, I think fast and I talk fast and I do fast. So, I'm letting go of that part of me that needs everything to happen in its time frame. And just, especially with the book, it's like, this isn't a business, project. This is a creative project. And that I had to really shift into that mindset because it's working on its own time frame,
That's amazing. Cool. Yeah, so physical things, personal life things, business things that are actually creative, like soul-filling things. That's great. You just mentioned like 4 things you're working on. Obviously, you're very driven.
Yeah, well, I was a train wreck when I was young. Had to do a lot of things to get to a more integrated place in my life, and it's still in me to continue to always achieve. And I'm excited for my first singing class on Friday.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I love that. I've
Yeah,
always wished I could sing, and then, you get to an age where you have these two beliefs. It's like one that you can be trained, and two that like you have to have this natural talent. But I have faith in you. I can't wait to hear hear the results.
that'll be a risk for me to sing live with an audience for sure.
Cool. Well, thanks so much. If there is, do you have any sort of like PDFs that you can pair with this, like about the three voices? Your website is live. Could people go to that
Yeah,
now? It's not done, but it's okay.
yeah, it's live. The free video series that's really explaining what you're gonna have here isn't up yet. I'm working on that this week, um,
Cool.
and I will soon have a passage of the book available that you can download there. So I don't have anything there, but you can message me from the website or on my Facebook and just ask for anything. And I don't know that I have any write ups specifically on this, but I mean, this recording will be available, and I think it's,
Yeah.
um, you know, a good starting point for most people.
Yeah.
Let's do a second one to go into the next level of making friends with the voices inside.
Yeah, I'd love that. Okay, cool. Let's close this and
Okay.
start to plan our next one. You guys get ready.
All right. Great to be with you.
Peace.
Okay. Let me hit finish.